Even more arrests today of people involved in that Capitol riot, including this guy caught on surveillance video attacking police officers with a bat. Of the dozens of people taken into custody so far, many of them part of extremist groups like militias, QAnon, Oath Keepers, and others. Several military veterans, they have been arrested. In fact, the Oath Keepers are a far-right group that's founded by law enforcement and vets, that according to the New York Times. Pentagon, they've stepped up screening of the 25,000 National Guard soldiers who are in D.C. right now trying to root out any extremists. After the vetting, 2 of them were removed for service due to inappropriate comments in text, and 10 others, they have been pulled from service over what the Pentagon is calling questionable behavior. The FBI has more than 300 open investigations. It has received more than 150,000 tips from the public due to the riots, and law enforcement particularly concerned about more targets now, including soft targets like crowded places, infrastructure, and anything that could disrupt the ceremonies. I want to bring in our guest, perfect person to help us figure out what we're dealing with here and where we go. Jason Blazakis, he a terror expert and a senior research fellow at the Soufan Center. And Jason, first of all, let's deal with the here and now, because I know you've been burning up the phone lines working with different state and local areas that have concerns like Washington as to what they may be dealing with tomorrow. Assess the threat. And for anybody who thinks it was just what happened January 6th in Washington, talk about the real concerns on the grounds right now in state capitals from coast to coast.
Hi, Richard. Great to be on the program. So January 6th was not a one-off event. You know, the threat level around the United States is correctly very high. A lot of National Guard members deployed at various state capitals, and of course, Washington, D.C., where there's more than 20,000 troops. And these troops are serving a really important deterrent effect, one that's likely, from my perspective, to discourage all except the most hardline potential terrorists. And on January 17th, we were all really concerned this weekend about the state capitals. We were really fearful of potential acts of violence, but it was that show of force, of strength by the military and law enforcement that I believe is one of the main reasons why we didn't see any acts of violence. So I actually am fairly optimistic that the 20th will pass in quite the same way in terms of the 17th. But that's not to say that we shouldn't remain vigilant for the possibility of an act of violence. There's a lot of online chatter and aspirational interest to carry out an act of violence. And I actually have been talking over the last few days a lot about soft targets. I'm particularly worried that because of the hardening of government buildings, we're going to see a shift in the kinds of targets these radical right-wing individuals may pursue, to include potentially social media targets. Obviously, the social media ban is going to inflame some individuals on the right. Media as well. We all remember on January 6th, a door in the Capitol building had scrawled upon it, "Murder the media." And then finally, not all members of Congress only have offices in the Capitol building of Washington, D.C. They have district offices throughout the country. So I'm really worried about those offices too, because they're not nearly as secure.
You know, what struck me, and I know this didn't surprise you because you've been, I know for a long time, talking about this growing threat, is not only how many people were there on the 6th, how many different groups they came from, and just the one constant was this level of grievance that they felt that they were entitled to, with violence, even, you know, fatal violence, but also just they thought they were in the right, Jason. And to that end, who are these people? How big of a problem are we talking about here, and just how committed are they?
So it's a widespread challenge. We're talking probably hundreds of thousands of individuals that have extremist beliefs, and then a smaller subset of those individuals that are willing to act in the ways that we saw on the 6th to essentially penetrate the Capitol building. So this is a serious bunch. And what we saw on the 6th was this uniting effect. The rhetoric of the president and those around him, in many ways, I think, incited these individual entities, Oath Keepers on one hand, 3%ers on another, Proud Boys and white supremacists, to have them all kind of merge and coalesce and to storm the Capitol together. And what's really motivating them is the spread of disinformation and conspiracies online. You know, things like the election was fraudulently stolen from the president. We all know that that was incorrect, but yet people read this, they believe it, and they act upon it now. So that is a big motivator for a lot of these people.
You know, I've done my best to try and show more than just the little clips to my audience, but the expanded clips where people can hear the exact words that were said from the stage from the president and some of, I would say, the other enablers, but also in that compelling New Yorker video, what they were saying, the cues. I mean, they've been around a lot longer than 4 years, Jason, but they feel, we saw it in Charlottesville, we saw it on the 6th, they feel that they're right, and they feel that, you know what, the president has their back. How much of an accelerant has the president's words been that they feel, in effect, that, you know, they've got the green light to do what they do?
Oh, it's a significant accelerant. The radical right's been mainstay in American history for a long time. It started to rise after the election of President Obama. And then 2016, President Trump was elected. And then he started using more incendiary language that really divides people, puts them in us and them camps. So it has accelerated these movements, sadly. And I think in many ways, it's allowed them to recruit more individuals to the movement as well, and to secure more finance for their activities. And we're learning now a lot about the financial aspect to this. They got a lot of money from various parts of the country to send people to the Capitol on the 6th. And that was, to me, really a telling message.
So the question is, Jason, what do we do about it? And put it and answer that question in a couple of contexts, because to me, concerning is how many former military law enforcement, it's a tiny percentage of the overall population, about people who wear a uniform, but still they're represented in this. And then also, listen, this is America. We have free speech here. How do you control the misinformation? And then worse than that, the encouragement to do these things. How do you break this down? And does the FBI have the tools, along with law enforcement, to really crack down on these guys?
So there are government solutions, private sector solutions, chiefly surrounding technological companies. And then there are civil society solutions to this problem. And there isn't one solution. So in terms of the government response, I do think in the Biden administration, you're going to see the FBI and DHS receive more resources to be able to tackle and track the domestic terrorism threat. I think we'll see more intelligence collection that comes along with that. I think lawmakers need to seriously consider whether or not it makes sense to pass a domestic terrorism law. In the United States, you can't charge a person for an act of domestic terrorism unless they use a weapon of mass destruction or an incendiary device or an explosive device. There have been other incidents where somebody was clearly politically motivated to do harm and to create fear in the community, but they weren't charged with an act of domestic terrorism just because they used a firearm. So I think we need to revisit that. I also think, because there is such a pronounced possibility of an insider threat that exists here, I think the Department of Defense needs to spend more time thinking about augmenting the capabilities of the investigative services, Army, Air Force, and Navy, NCIS, so they have the resources to criminally investigate individuals who may be imbibing the conspiracy theories. And then on the social media side, Facebook, Twitter, those companies need to continue to fight conspiracies and disinformation on their platforms and fight rhetoric that is clearly designed to incite people to carry out acts of violence.
Sure sounds like we got a lot of work ahead of us. Jason, I appreciate the time tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
You too. All right, everyone, when we come back, as the Trump presidency winds down, we're going to show you in a short form the ups and the downs and the legacy that he has left behind, a tarnished one.